In 2015, Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission delivered its final report. It included 94 calls to action. It urged Canadians to work towards reconciliation and to address the harms caused by residential schools. Some of that work was productive, some of it didn't pan out, and there's still a lot left to do. But sometimes when you read the headlines or follow social media, you're left with the question, is reconciliation even possible? CBC was curious about that question. So we got together a group of people with various backgrounds, a former commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, an author and academic, a chief of the Cowessess First Nation, and one of the founders of Regina's White Pony Youth Lodge. And we invited the public to join us in this group discussion. Is reconciliation even possible?
It's happening. Reconciliation can't be done without uncomfortable conversations. And some of those uncomfortable conversations are starting to happen more and more. There was a little bit of what you call ignorance at one point, a little bit of just the past is the past kind of attitude, the blame game. But now we're starting to, as a society, get it. That something happened that we didn't create, but we inherited. And now we got 94 calls to action that it's up to us to own them, regardless of our background, and to walk forward together, shoulder to shoulder. We have such talented people in the province. We have such talented people in the country, and over 100,000 authors who went through the pain of residential school gave us 94 things to implement. And now people are the momentum's starting to build. And you have things like the Boucher case or the Fontaine case that just take a snapshot in time to say, okay, we really have to take these 94 calls to action a little more serious, because we can't do it with just silos. It has to be with no walls, no barriers. So it is happening, and I'm excited to be a part of just a little bit of that to allow it to build the momentum.
Not only is it possible, it is unfolding. The very fact that we are here tonight and we are having this conversation, if we were to ask ourselves honestly, would we be having this conversation 10 years ago, even 5 years ago? I think we all know the answer. So I think the question only becomes one that causes us concern if we set ourselves up to believe there is a right answer to what reconciliation means, and that there's only one answer, and what if we don't have it right yet, and what if everything isn't already towards being fixed? I think we were very clear when we wrote the report from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and our calls to action that reconciliation is not a quick fix. It's not a flip of the switch kind of thing. It is not easy, and it is also complex. It's complex and complicated. But we were very intentional in directing our calls to action to a wide cross-section of society, in the belief that there is work to be done by all of us in all sectors of our society. And so the trick is to keep trying what we're trying, to start trying where we're not yet trying, and to keep encouraging each other as we move forward.
Reconciliation is possible, but it's also incumbent upon all of us, because if we can't achieve that goal, and this is going to be a generational process, we're going to be doomed. And I teach health studies, so the way I think of this is, actually it was Minister Jane Philpott just in January said that Indigenous Canadians have a 15-year shorter life expectancy than the rest of us. So that's almost the quantifiable measure of how far we've got to go. And that's not going to change overnight. And really, in my research, Cadmus just mentioned, the court case was like a photo. My work as a historian is to make the movie. And really, our Indigenous people in Saskatchewan and Canada and the rest of us, our societies have been going on different trajectories almost since the time of the treaties. And in a lot of ways, we don't understand each other. So we have to get together, we have to meet each other, we have to start speaking to each other. And as Cadmus said, we got to have those difficult conversations.
I also believe that reconciliation is possible. And before I supply my answer, I just want to acknowledge our elder for lifting prayers for us. But not only that, acknowledge that we are on Treaty 4 territory, homeland of the Cree, Soto, Nakota, Dakota, and Lakota, and homelands of the Métis. So in regards to reconciliation, I really believe that it is possible, but it's going to take all levels of government, but also individuals within the community to really make it work. Will we achieve it in my lifetime? I don't believe so. I think that we still need to look at the truth part of it and really not romanticize reconciliation. Although that's a goal that we want to achieve, we can't jump over the truth part of the truth and reconciliation. So it's a very important aspect, but I really believe that today there are many things that are being done within our communities, within organizations that are really kind of working towards, that can work towards it, and it is achievable for sure.
My name is Blair Roberts. I've lived in Regina for about 15 years now. I can't quit thinking about Colton Boushie and Tina Fontaine. I know they're but they're the latest in a long list of names that have lost their lives. And I guess part of the reason I'm here tonight, this whole question, is reconciliation possible? How? Maybe that's, I know you guys have been talking about it all night, but like as a white individual, I don't know how that forgiveness could be there. Like the conversation feels so toxic right now. I know like even CBC has closed down a lot of the comment sections on the Indigenous stories because of the racism. And so you mentioned Colton Boushie, and suddenly everybody feels like they can come out of the woodwork. It's almost like people have permission to be racist now, or they don't think they're being racist. But anyway, to wrap it up, I guess my question to you guys would just be, in the midst of this, I know tension isn't always a bad thing, right? Maybe this tension can lead us somewhere healthy, but what if you could point maybe to something that gives you hope in the midst of what feels to me like a really heavy, dark time?
Well, my comments wouldn't be so specific just to Saskatchewan, but I do believe I agree with what the last speaker said, that I try to be a very positive person, and I can assure you that I would not have survived hearing the statements that we heard from 7,000 people, that I would not have been able to bear that without being able to see the positive that was in what was said to us in terms of what people had managed to do with their own lives and what they were willing to share with the rest of the country. So I think that we are forced, in a way, to confront things when they are real people with real names, with real pictures of real lives and real devastation that is in our midst. It's not a theoretical issue. It's not a dusty historical issue. It's a right now issue in our midst, and that sharpens our attention, and that's a good thing. As long as we don't think reconciliation is an exercise in hand-wringing or an exercise in twiddling our thumbs. It is reconciliation. And for each of us not to fret endlessly about what can be done and what can I do, but rather to say, what am I doing? And if the answer is I am either not doing anything differently than I ever did before, or I'm not doing anything new that is something that I did not do before, then we are not challenging ourselves enough. I think each of us should be asking ourselves those questions. And I think we should be also convening new circles of people. So if it's the same people talking to the same people in the future, we shouldn't expect big new answers to be unfolding. But if we are consciously and intentionally inviting new people to our conversations so that we're being provoked to think about things in new ways and to benefit from the perspectives of others that we may not have known before, then all kinds of new possibilities open themselves up. And so I think we just keep trying on that front. We hold our politicians to account because one of the things they hold is resources that can make a huge difference in all kinds of fronts, and that needs to be redistributed and shared in a more fair way. And I think we, all of us, make sure that we are loving our children to the maximum, because we have inherited a whole generation of children who've grown up thinking that no one loved them and that no one cared about them. And some of them, by their own repeated admission, have therefore not known how to express that to their children. And it is a devastation that can be ruinous to lives, and we need to stop that. We need to recognize the children in our midst as all of our children, and to love them as we would any of our own children. And that is our shared and sacred responsibility, in my opinion.
First, understanding that reconciliation begins with yourself. It begins with you forming an understanding on what reconciliation may look like with the other individuals' feelings and other person's feelings as well. And I'm sorry about that, but I feel it's like, being responsible, but also taking ownership. And I think that needs to come from both sides, both non-Indigenous and the Indigenous community. And I feel like when it comes to reconciliation and coming together and rebuilding again, I think we need to understand that, first of all, a lot of times we kind of hook forgiveness onto that. And reconciliation doesn't necessarily say we need to forgive, right? But reconciliation says, let's build a new relationship. To me, that's what reconciliation looks like, and built on trust and trust and understanding each other. So not necessarily do we necessarily need to forgive, because sometimes it's really tough to forgive, and there has been a lot of trust that was broken down, within our communities, within our relationships, and sometimes it's a tough place. But at the same time, we need to understand that reconciliation doesn't necessarily always mean forgiving. It just means building a new relationship.
Thank you so much, Shauna. James?
Thanks. I guess just building on Shauna's point about individuals and family. I'm not sure if you folks are familiar with a book from a couple years ago called The Education of Augie Morasti. Right, I'm seeing a lot of heads kind of nodding. Well, it was a residential school memoir written by a man who'd survived, but he was really damaged. And so over the course of probably a decade, maybe 15 years, he worked with an English professor to write a manuscript. And really, he told people, sometimes he was homeless in Prince Albert, sometimes he'd disappear for a while, but he was telling people, I'm writing a book. And people kind of blew him off. He's riding the bus all day, yeah, right, we'll see when I believe. Actually, that's what happened to me for a while, but that's another story. Anyhow, when Augie's book finally came out, it was before he passed away, and he actually had the proof. And he brought that book to his family. And I think it was his daughter said, this ends here. Because, excuse me, Augie owned his story. He took it back. And so that's where things are going to change, in individual families. And I think, Chastity, talking about, what do we tell the school kids? I was up at Little Pine First Nation a few years ago, speaking to the grade 7s, and Chief Little Pine was actually starved into going to his community. That was a terrible message to give the grade 7s. And I said, look, I know you guys are mad, but don't break a window. Go to law school. That's where you can make the change. So, and I guess to address your point, yeah, like it's, you know, we've all, well, probably all of us in this room are hope, you know, like are looking out and thinking maybe, you know, oh, maybe reconciliation is a mirage after, you know, after the verdict in the Stanley trial. But maybe what it is it just puts into sharp focus how much work we all as citizens have to do. Like this is going to be a long road to hoe, for sure.
Cadmus.
Thank you. Try answer a lot of it. I got 1 minute. I know I got 1 minute.
1 minute.
Somebody asked me one time, so how is it being Indigenous, ... I'm like, well, I don't know how it is to be non-Indigenous, so I don't know how to answer that question. You know, being a golfer, I'm just going to end with this. I entered a field where there was no Indigenous people around me. And I felt I had to constantly prove myself and prove myself and prove myself. And every time I tried to give up telling my mom and dad, I don't want to prove myself anymore. I just want to stay home. I'm the only Indian there. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't feel included. And my dad just would sit me down and he says, don't you ever stop improving yourself to people. Because right now you're going to bust through barriers that the next one coming behind you, it's going to be easier. And you have to do that. So I kept busting through these barriers of golf till I got to the top. And I didn't look back. I just started winning and winning and winning and winning. It wasn't the trophies that I was winning. It was the fact that there was a guy that was a First Nation that was winning in a competition where First Nations people don't win. And now today when I look back, I see about 10 First Nation kids doing that. You know, and Chastity's question and my brother who got up and shared a little bit about his challenges is if you feel that you're just tired of proving yourself, look at that little kid that you're going to fist pound with. And Chastity says, what do you tell him? You ask him, who are you chasing? You're chasing yourself in 10 years. Don't compare yourself to a rapper. Don't compare yourself to a movie star. Chase yourself in 10 years. Who do you look up to? Look up, have faith. Everybody needs faith. Look up to something. And you know, and who do you get excited to see? It's your family when you get home at the end of the day. So just in conclusion, you know, this is a really, really good, I have so much more to say, but I just want to end it off by saying, you know, it takes all of us, and I was really excited to share, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
And I want to say to Chief Cadmus that I want to move, because if everyone gets to be good looking in your community, then... No, but I actually do want to pick up on that little kid. I want to tell you a really fast little story about my granddaughter, who's Dena in the Northwest Territories. And we were at a gathering a couple of months ago now. She was with a group of little kids dancing. The teacher was away, and this replacement said, to get to know the kids, I want you all to tell me your favorite color, and I want you to tell me your favorite animal. So they went around the circle. The colors were mostly pink. They were little girls. And then the animals. And I heard my granddaughter say, my favorite animal is a unicorn. So we're driving home, and she's 9, and I say, Sadea, you do know that unicorns are not real animals, right? And she looked at me like I was some kind of idiot, and she said, Mimi, of course I do, she said. But I like to believe in my own imagination. And I love that story because that's what we're being asked to do, I think, as a community, as communities, and as a country, is to believe in our own imagination of those things that we have not yet seen, that may seem unrealistic just because they've never been real in our reality, and to believe they're possible because we choose to believe in them.
If you want to learn more about reconciliation in Canada, go to our website, cbc.ca/beyond94. I'm Zarka Nawaz. Thanks for watching.